the absolute wart in this investigation, in my opinion, of leaving that crime scene with evidence that suggests that this is not a missing person. Um, the things that may have been or may become the real Achilles heel for this investigation.
And here's what I would wish at this point is that the sheriff would stop talking.
The investigation, which is now about a month old, keeps bringing up new questions as authorities reconsider early updates and crucial decisions that could still influence the final result. Information collected from various sources indicated that the inquiry quickly evolved from a typical missing person case to one involving suspicions of criminal activity. The initial details shared with the public created two conflicting theories. Was Nancy just gone, or was there something much more sinister at play? Since that time, the online chatter has become much more intense. People are poring over reports of potential clues, personal effects like a watch, and recently discovered security camera footage of a car driving through the area. Strange facts keep coming to light during the search for Nancy Guthrie. Based on publicly available information, law enforcement has reportedly analyzed several items that were found miles from her residence, which included a number of gloves. At the very same time, the information being shared with everyone has seemed contradictory, which has only sparked more speculation on the internet. Sources have also hinted at possible disagreements on strategy between federal agents and the local authorities as the case unfolds. To get a clearer picture of how these kinds of cases typically progress, seasoned investigators have been carefully analyzing the details. One retired homicide detective with many years of experience has emphasized that careful management of the crime scene and following strict protocols are absolutely essential in complicated cases. Commentators also observe that fervent online debates within the true crime world can sometimes make investigations harder, particularly when rumors spread more quickly than verified information. The public's fascination with the disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie grew almost instantly. A large part of that interest was due to her supposed family relationship with a prominent television journalist, which immediately propelled the case onto the national stage. When a missing person case gets that much attention, every single update provided by law enforcement is carefully dissected by the public and the news media. The early press conferences were also instrumental in forming the public's view. News reports suggest that certain officials seemed uncomfortable when they were speaking to reporters, and that created a feeling of doubt about how the investigation was moving along. Whenever communication seems muddled, rumors tend to multiply rapidly across the internet. In just a matter of days, new allegations started to make the rounds, including a rumored message that hinted at a possible ransom demand. Law enforcement officials usually insist that details like that need to be given directly to them, so the information can be properly examined as a piece of the investigation. The public conversation surrounding the Nancy Guthrie case became even more charged after specific details were circulated publicly before authorities had a chance to assess them. A lot of commentators feel that any materials related to a potential ransom note should have been sent straight to the police instead of being shared with the public. As soon as that information spread across the web, the narrative exploded and attracted an even greater amount of national interest. Some of the initial uncertainty was also a result of how various law enforcement organizations handle communication during a major case. In many jurisdictions, sheriffs are publicly elected officials, while city police forces are run with different chains of command, and experts note these differences can impact how information is shared with everyone. Veteran investigators frequently stress that in delicate situations, managing the public narrative is every bit as critical as finding evidence. When rumors start flying on social media and in online forums, it can generate a lot of static that detectives must cut through while attempting to stay focused on the facts of the investigation. Concerns have also been voiced regarding the way details have been communicated to the public throughout the inquiry into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. In a lot of counties, sheriffs are elected, and that can put them under pressure to speak directly with their constituents. However, certain investigators feel that holding press conferences too often can sometimes generate more confusion instead of providing clarity. Professionals frequently recommend that structured releases like regular written summaries, can help guarantee that all information is correct and aligned with federal counterparts. This strategy gives detectives an opportunity to verify information before it is ever shared with the world. During the initial briefings related to this case, members of federal organizations were also seen standing beside the local authorities. Observers pointed out that these appearances were a clear sign of teamwork between the departments, as the inquiry progressed and officials tried to keep everyone up to date. Away from the cameras, this kind of interagency teamwork is a very normal component of complicated searches, like the one for Nancy Guthrie. Local departments usually direct the investigation, while federal organizations offer extra personnel, high-tech equipment, and expert assistance whenever it's required. This sort of cooperative effort is standard for missing person cases, particularly when the circumstances capture the nation's attention. Nevertheless, online chatter has started to question why the federal authorities haven't simply assumed leadership of the entire investigation. Professionals in the field often have to clarify that this is not the way these collaborations typically function. As a rule, local police forces maintain control over the case, while federal agents come in to help when and where they are needed. That kind of public discussion can create additional stress for the officials who have to speak at media briefings. In previous statements, the local leadership announced that all future press events would be held only when there was a major development to announce, which is a move many detectives see as useful for keeping the conversation centered on verified information instead of rumors. The confusion surrounding the Nancy Guthrie case is also tied to the way details have been released to the public. Professionals generally suggest that all information should come out through formal statements or from a public information officer, which makes sure the message is straightforward and uniform. In this particular instance, some of the information was said to have come from casual media interviews and statements from anonymous sources. Experts note that when details come out through unofficial avenues, it can easily result in conflicting reports and an increase in speculation. Law enforcement professionals will always underscore that information in an ongoing case should be released by the official agencies that are leading the investigation. When unconfirmed stories start to circulate, they can develop a narrative of their own on the internet, which makes it much harder for people to distinguish between established facts and simple gossip. As the inquiry moves forward, the speculation concerning Nancy Guthrie's disappearance has continued to mount as individuals online share their personal ideas about what might have transpired. Investigators report that this level of focus frequently brings in an enormous amount of tips, personal theories, and unconfirmed allegations. In numerous high-profile situations, authorities have mentioned getting communications from people who are certain they have unique knowledge or a different version of events. Even though a few suggestions might prove to be valuable, the majority are found to be just guesswork instead of actual proof. Professional detectives always stay focused on credible leads and established investigative techniques. Detectives will typically keep examining evidence, reconstructing timelines, and speaking with potential witnesses, all while sifting through the massive amount of data being sent their way. While public fascination helps keep the case in the spotlight, experts note that rampant speculation can sometimes cause interruptions that just add confusion to an already difficult investigation. Major cases, such as the vanishing of Nancy Guthrie, frequently draw a huge amount of public interest, especially due to her reported ties to a famous media personality. Professionals say that when an investigation gets national attention, comments from public figures and widespread online debates can sometimes divert attention from the actual investigative work. According to law enforcement experts, a great number of investigations get their start with a simple welfare check. A police officer or a sheriff's deputy is usually the first person on the scene to evaluate what is happening and to figure out if a more detailed look is warranted. If anything seems out of place, the matter is then handed over to detectives who are trained to manage complicated situations. Investigators point out that this initial phase is absolutely vital. The first things noticed and the choices made by the responding officers can determine the entire path of the investigation in the following days and weeks. Appalling errors at the location of an inquiry can permanently redirect a case. A review of discussions among investigators reveals how the initial hours at a scene can determine the whole sequence of events. In a classic example that detectives often bring up, officers first secured a house as other officials came to survey the area. Several individuals apparently moved about the space, as the first officer there meticulously inspected items he thought might help establish a time frame. One particular thing stood out. A tray of ice cubes on a kitchen counter looked like it had been left completely undisturbed, and the officer began to log the time, thinking it might be a clue as to when someone was last in the residence. He apparently spent hours gathering nearby drinkware and other objects that could possibly contain important clues. It was later clarified by an official that the ice was for a beverage made right at the location, which perfectly illustrates how simple it is for crucial evidence to be accidentally compromised. Experts emphasize that maintaining tight control of a scene is absolutely vital, as the way evidence is managed from the start can determine if a case goes cold or grows incredibly complicated. Securing the area is a fundamental principle in any significant criminal inquiry. Veteran investigators always point out that after a site is locked down, entry must be severely limited to safeguard any potential evidence. This is a common protocol across numerous agencies, where detectives and crime scene technicians are given authority over the location. Usually, just the necessary staff are permitted within the established perimeter, and all other officers must stay beyond that line. This precaution is designed to stop any inadvertent contamination that might compromise the evidence-gathering process. Field experts frequently stress that these protocols are enforced for everybody, no matter their position or title. Establishing undisputed command of the area enables investigators to concentrate on recording specifics, collecting items, and constructing a dependable sequence of events. For intricate situations such as the Nancy Guthrie disappearance, meticulous handling of the scene in the initial phase can significantly influence the entire investigation's direction. Those first moments at Guthrie's residence might contain vital clues about the inquiry's origins. Based on official reviews and public accounts, the deputies sent for a wellness check were initially sent to an incorrect address. Once they got the right location and reached the correct residence, they allegedly observed indications that something was out of the ordinary. A specific point frequently brought up in conversations about this case is the discovery of tiny blood specks close to the front porch, combined with a lack of any answer from within the house. Discoveries of this nature usually lead officers to start a much more thorough evaluation of the area. It is standard practice in many jurisdictions for patrol deputies to reach out to their detective divisions and ask for assistance from crime scene experts. These experts then assess the circumstances to decide if detectives need to be brought in to lead the investigation. Insiders with knowledge of the procedure stated that as soon as these initial signs were found, the inquiry formally escalated into a more critical stage, with detectives starting their analysis of the evidence. The scale and capabilities of the local law enforcement agency can also influence the methods used for processing scenes in cases like Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Official documents reveal that the Sheriff's Department is a substantial organization, employing hundreds of officers and personnel, which suggests several crime scene units were likely on call. It is common for investigators to dedicate numerous hours to documenting the area and gathering evidence before the site is formally released. The scene is typically turned back over only after detectives have concluded that the preliminary collection work is finished. Nevertheless, just because a location has been released doesn't imply that the investigation there is over. It is not uncommon for authorities to go back at a later time should fresh information come to light. In this particular situation, it was reported that federal agents returned to the property once they joined the search effort. On subsequent visits, experts might bring in canine units or inspect other parts of the grounds. These are measures investigators describe as standard procedure whenever new leads develop in an active case. The investigation into the Nancy Guthrie matter certainly did not conclude after the initial scene processing was done. Once evidence has been gathered, a lot of it has to be shipped to specialized labs for deeper examination. This could involve anything from electronic data and biological specimens to fingerprints and various other items collected at the scene. Professionals confirm this phase of the process is usually very time-consuming. Contrary to what is depicted on television, forensic examinations and digital forensics almost never yield instant answers. Every single item of evidence requires meticulous inspection and documentation before any conclusions can be made by the investigators. It has also been reported that federal experts equipped with sophisticated digital retrieval technology have been helping to analyze electronic files and communication records. According to sources knowledgeable about these procedures, the measures being implemented seem to align with the standard handling of intricate cases, despite intense public interest in its development. Online discussions about the management of the Nancy Guthrie scene have persisted, yet a number of investigators feel that much of the critique is probably unwarranted. Experts who deal with complicated investigations advise that attention should be kept on the evidence and the procedural work, not on speculation from observers. A different, crucial job in situations like this is to conduct a thorough canvass of the surrounding area. Detectives frequently go from one house to the next, talking with people who live there and looking at security footage to reconstruct a sequence of events for that location. The main objective is to find any strange occurrences that happened near the time the individual vanished. Information indicates that video surveillance in certain sections of the neighborhood is sparse or unreliable, a factor that complicates this effort significantly. Historically, privacy issues in many communities have restricted the installation of widespread surveillance cameras. This is a variable that can impact the amount of visual data available for investigators to analyze throughout their search. A particular element that drew public notice in the Nancy Guthrie case concerned several objects that were found miles from her residence. One of the publicly discussed findings was the retrieval of multiple gloves approximately 2 miles from her property. Although this find rapidly became a hot topic on the internet, authorities frequently warn that objects located nearby are not necessarily linked to the case. A map of the nearby community reveals why the search is substantially more complex than most people might think. Even though the location was first called remote, official data shows thousands of homes and properties exist within a 1.5-mile radius of the house. To the investigation team, this translates to a massive area that needs to be covered. Detectives and search parties must get in touch with numerous residents, look over security tapes, and examine endless doorbell camera recordings to construct a credible timeline. Professionals state that even with canine units or expert teams, combing through such an expansive area is like looking for one tiny clue in a vast expanse. Grasping the sheer magnitude of the search area near Nancy Guthrie's residence makes it clear why investigators are up against such a formidable challenge. Sources within law enforcement indicate that an initial step in these situations is always a canvass of the neighborhood. Authorities will usually talk to people living nearby, check security footage, and attempt to identify potential routes of approach or escape related to the event. The investigative team might look into multiple travel routes, pushing their search area out to include local streets, shops, and other places with cameras that could have recorded vehicles in the vicinity. Through the comparison of video from various sources, detectives try to spot recurring patterns or specific vehicles that were present during the same time frame. This task becomes exponentially more difficult when you factor in the vastness of the surrounding area. Puma County spans thousands of square miles, and a great deal of that is open desert territory. Given its sheer size, experts note that pinpointing specific evidence or a person inside such an enormous area takes time, teamwork, and a massive amount of resources. For the detectives, piecing together the complete narrative requires meticulously sifting through huge volumes of data collected over an incredibly broad area. The immense scale of the search zone remains a defining factor in the investigation of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Investigators assigned to these types of cases have to determine the boundaries for their neighborhood canvassing. Every new street, house, or lot adds to the time and personnel needed to examine doorbell footage, talk with inhabitants, and look over possible leads. While mapping software and geographical analysis can help illustrate the scope of the work, investigators say the job is still a monumental undertaking. Combing through extensive residential areas and adjacent undeveloped land can rapidly evolve into a highly complicated endeavor. Right from the start, some analysts looking at the public data raised doubts about whether the circumstances match the profile of a standard abduction. Initial theories about what happened did succeed in attracting more federal support to the case, bringing in sophisticated equipment and expert units. Nevertheless, professionals experienced in these situations frequently point out that finding someone who vanishes under mysterious conditions can be an incredibly challenging task. Within expansive areas like the ones around Tucson, even seasoned search parties can encounter significant obstacles while attempting to find crucial evidence or figure out precisely what occurred. A primary hurdle for investigators in situations like Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is the profound difficulty of finding evidence spread out over great distances. Specialists frequently note that finding a missing individual without solid leads is incredibly complex, even inside large cities. Metropolitan areas themselves can span hundreds of square miles, with adjacent rural zones extending much further. The presence of undeveloped land, rivers, and remote terrain can complicate search efforts even more. As a result of these circumstances, certain investigations can drag on for extended periods, and not all pieces of evidence are ever found. This fact is often at odds with the public's perception, which is influenced by television shows where cases seem to be solved in a short time. In the real world, the investigative process can be far more prolonged. Security camera footage showing a vehicle in the vicinity has also sparked significant interest in the Guthrie case. When detectives analyze this kind of video, they usually synchronize the timestamps with other electronic data to create a clearer picture of when critical moments might have unfolded. Detectives have also been exploring potential connections between travel routes and the timing of events in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. According to timelines shared publicly, it's believed by some that a car captured on nearby surveillance cameras could have arrived at that spot in approximately 6 minutes from a pivotal point in the sequence of events. A map of the local streets provides a clear picture of how detectives analyze potential pathways in and out of the vicinity. By carefully examining the layout of the road network, investigators can hypothesize about the different ways a car could have come into or left the surrounding neighborhoods. The reported discovery of gloves in various spots, including some found miles from the residence, also generated a lot of buzz on the internet. Although this news sparked widespread speculation, authorities frequently warn that objects found in the general vicinity are not necessarily linked to the investigation. When assessing evidence of this nature, investigators will usually cross-reference travel paths, points of entry, and destinations in the area. A clear understanding of the local geography helps them determine if a particular spot fits into the sequence of events they are working to piece together. New findings in the Nancy Guthrie investigation have consistently captivated the public, particularly since details are emerging as the case develops. For instance, the discovery of a glove during a search of the vicinity immediately set off a firestorm of conversation in the media and online. Authorities have clarified that securing items like this is just a routine part of the process. While conducting a search, officers typically collect any object that might have a possible link to what they are investigating. The standard approach is to secure any potential evidence first and sort out its significance later, rather than risk missing a crucial clue. An item's actual importance is established down the line through detailed laboratory analysis, where experts check for DNA, fingerprints, or other traces that could connect it to the missing individual or the scene of the investigation. Since the public is following every development as it unfolds, each new finding instantly makes the news. But experts point out that after forensic testing is finished, a large number of these collected items often end up being completely unrelated to the case. The team assigned to the Nancy Guthrie case is currently concentrating on processing the vast quantity of evidence that has been gathered. A great deal of this effort takes place out of the public eye, with experts meticulously examining digital files, forensic evidence, and other items collected from various search areas. It's common for federal agencies equipped with sophisticated data retrieval technology to assist during this phase of an investigation. A standard procedure involves analyzing cell tower data from the area, and specialists indicate that these records can capture thousands or even hundreds of thousands of individual pings in a very brief period. The job of the analysts is to meticulously sift through all that data to isolate the exact window of time and the particular devices that matter. This painstaking effort can last for weeks, if not months, and while the public might be hoping for a breakthrough, detectives stress that this meticulous work is crucial to prevent any errors. Meanwhile, the huge media spotlight on this investigation adds another layer of complexity for law enforcement. It's not uncommon for officers to be tailed by journalists and internet personalities who are all trying to get the next big scoop as it happens. The reality of police work often bears little resemblance to what's shown in crime dramas on television. According to law enforcement insiders, it's standard practice to deploy specialized units whenever a warrant is executed or a large-scale search is conducted. A tactical team might be the first to go in and make sure the area is safe for the forensics unit to move in and start their work. Since so many people get their information about police work from movies, television shows, and internet forums, their ideas about how these situations play out can often be skewed. Professionals point out that actual police work adheres to strict protocols that can be quite different from the public's perception. Electronic forensics is also a critical component of any contemporary investigation, and in previous instances, detectives have analyzed security footage of a suspect on their cell phone just before a major crime occurred. In a situation like that, analysts will coordinate with the phone companies to pinpoint which cell towers were in use and then examine the connection logs for a very specific period. The challenge is that these logs can contain tens of thousands of separate pings. These specialists have to painstakingly filter the information, cross-referencing it against surveillance video and other clues until they can figure out if a certain phone or person is connected to the crime. This kind of digital analysis, especially in an inquiry like the Nancy Guthrie case, is an incredibly labor-intensive process. When police look at cell tower data, a huge volume of information can be generated in just a brief time frame. For populated locations, a single 40-minute span can log more than 100,000 separate connections, and experts have to whittle that data down piece by piece to isolate the crucial information. This is meticulous and complex work that demands intense concentration and perseverance from the digital forensics unit. As specialists often say, even though today's tech offers incredible capabilities, it's not a magic bullet, and every piece of data needs to be cross-referenced with things like security camera, video, or official timelines. Since the Nancy Guthrie investigation has captured the nation's interest, the public is hanging on every new detail that gets released. But authorities continue to stress that this type of in-depth analysis can't be rushed, as they work to find who did this and provide definitive answers about what happened. To understand why a case like Nancy Guthrie's gets so much attention, it helps to look at the national picture. Hundreds of thousands of missing person reports are filed annually across the country, but only a small fraction of those are confirmed kidnappings, which forces police departments to carefully manage their resources. It would be impossible to launch a major investigation for each and every report, as that would demand an enormous amount of manpower and money that most agencies simply don't have. Typically, the first step is handled by a missing persons division, which is responsible for the initial intake and fact-finding. When red flags appear suggesting that foul play might be involved, the file is usually handed off to a team of detectives that deals with major crimes. This handover is a critical step because the entire strategy shifts as soon as investigators start to believe a crime may have been committed. At that point, the scene and all potential evidence are handled with the extreme care reserved for the most serious investigations. Detectives meticulously comb through the area as they work to figure out what took place, which is a common stage in inquiries like the one into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. In the beginning, the primary goal is to cast a wide net for information by following up on public tips, looking at evidence, and trying to develop new leads. When that initial flurry of activity eventually dies down, the focus moves to a much deeper and more systematic analysis of all the collected material. During this phase, detectives are going back over old tips, studying the results from the crime lab, and meticulously piecing together a chronology of what happened. It's not unusual for investigators to already have people they are looking at by this point, but simply identifying a potential suspect is just the first step. The mission is to build a solid case with enough corroborated evidence to be able to move forward with charges down the road. This methodical process is vital, according to legal experts, because the objective isn't just to solve the mystery, but to build a prosecution that can hold up under the pressure of a trial. The level of public interest in the Nancy Guthrie disappearance has been exceptionally high. Some observers believe this is partly because a family member is a famous broadcast journalist, a fact that has undeniably fueled the nationwide media interest in the story. But authorities are quick to point out that a high-profile victim doesn't automatically explain why a crime happened. sometimes a break-in might be motivated by nothing more than the simple belief that there's something valuable inside the house. So far, the Patilis have yet to release any official theory about a possible motive for Guthrie's disappearance. It's also significant that they have kept a tight lid on the details of what, if anything, was found at the scene inside the house. It's standard procedure for law enforcement to hold certain facts back from the public while an investigation is ongoing. This is a crucial tactic, according to veteran detectives, because it allows them to use details from the crime scene that only the perpetrator would know when they finally interrogate a suspect. Withholding that information is a powerful tool for confirming if a person's story lines up with the actual facts of the case. In the Guthrie investigation, perhaps the most talked about clue is the security footage that captured an unknown individual right outside the residence. This footage, which has become widely known as the porch video, has prompted a lot of speculation from people following the investigation. It's been pointed out that the person is wearing unusual attire and was holding multiple objects, which could indicate a certain degree of planning was involved. However, police frequently warn that you can't always judge a situation based on a brief video clip, as it may not show the entire story. Specific actions seen in the footage, like the way the person was handling things by the doorway, have also been intensely scrutinized by the public. Investigators often find that subtle details such as a person's stance, their actions, and the timing of events can offer valuable insights. Online forums have been buzzing with theories about extra gear the person might have been holding. But professionals insist that any firm conclusions must wait until all video and other evidence from the inquiry have been meticulously examined. With the Nancy Guthrie case still active, specialists note that public speculation frequently outpaces the actual evidence that has been confirmed. It's common for internet conversations to be filled with ideas and assumptions that don't align with what the authorities are discovering. Professionals examining the case highlight how easily the public can misread minor clues or jump to conclusions based on incomplete details. This sort of guesswork tends to go viral on news outlets and social media during highly publicized inquiries. A number of experts also suggest that reducing the flow of public statements during an open case could minimize misunderstanding. Rather than providing a steady stream of information, authorities might choose to give occasional briefings that outline verified developments but keep crucial information confidential. Police departments typically only share new details when they feel it might prompt the community to come forward with valuable tips. Adopting this strategy lets detectives and their federal counterparts assess evidence, look into leads, and explore different lines of inquiry free from pointless interruptions. At this time, the authorities working on the case are concentrating on collecting solid facts and advancing the inquiry one stage at a time. The conversation surrounding the Nancy Guthrie inquiry really underscores how multifaceted cases get examined from numerous perspectives. Specialists who analyze significant investigations often field a barrage of inquiries from the general public, particularly once a case captures the nation's interest. Commentators have pointed out that the public dialogue has centered on the investigative methods just as much as the evidence itself. Subjects like securing the crime scene, forensic examination, and interagency cooperation frequently come up in these conversations. Insiders tracking the inquiry suggest that the aim of this public scrutiny is to get a clearer picture of the investigative timeline and the potential moves officials are making privately. Even though much of the investigation is still under wraps, the team continues to collect clues, assessing data, and chase down every possibility, as those in charge of the search are determined to find a definite conclusion and deliver answers to Nancy Guthrie's loved ones. While the inquiry into Nancy Guthrie's vanishing moves forward, specialists point out that the public's focus can be crucial for maintaining awareness as detectives operate out of sight. Conversations on television, news, and social media sites have centered on examining the clues, the methods of the investigation, and the hurdles officials must overcome in such a difficult case. Commentators observing the developments have stressed that actual police work seldom happens at a fast pace. Every piece of evidence has to be thoroughly inspected, all tips need to be confirmed, and the detectives have to make certain that their findings are backed by solid proof. At present, the authorities are concentrating on collecting data, dissecting the evidence, and pressing on with the quest for answers that might explain what took place. We promise to keep you posted on all confirmed new information and any progress from the forensics team. We appreciate you for tuning in and for your loyal viewership of our channel. Keep your eyes open, know the facts, and join us in the demand for a resolution. Behind every high-profile disappearance is not just a mystery, but a painful reminder of how fragile human life can be and how deeply every decision matters. The case of Nancy Guthrie teaches us that truth is not found through noise, rumors, or reckless speculation. It is found through patience, responsibility, and respect for facts. This story also reminds us that elderly people are among the most vulnerable members of any community. Their safety should never be treated as an afterthought. A missed sign, a delayed response, or a careless assumption can change everything. That is why families, neighbors, and authorities all share a duty to stay alert, speak up quickly, and protect those who may not be able to protect themselves. Just as important, this case shows how dangerous public rumor can become. In moments of fear, people often rush to guess, accuse, and spread unverified claims. But real justice requires discipline. Compassion must come before curiosity, and truth must come before attention. If there is one lasting lesson here, it is this: every life deserves urgency, dignity, and care. When someone vanishes, we should not only ask what happened, but also whether we, as a society, are doing enough to look after one another before tragedy ever begins.